There is a deeply painful paradox in relationships with avoidant people. They can be the ones who choose to leave, and yet never fully leave you. They say they need space, say things have changed, say they no longer feel the same, and yet they are often the ones quietly checking your social media late at night, sending a short message after months of silence, or reappearing through small signals just enough to make your heart move again. And what hurts is not only that half return, but the feeling that you are being kept inside a story with no clear ending. If they wanted to leave, why can't they let go? If they still remember, why don't they stay? From the perspective of avoidant psychology, this is not random contradiction. It is the trace of a deep inner conflict. They are pulled toward a kind of connection that makes them feel truly seen, while also being frightened by the level of intimacy that same connection creates. This becomes especially powerful when the other person is someone emotionally perceptive, deeply understanding, yet not controlling, demanding, or consuming. That kind of presence gives the avoidant person a rare experience, being understood without being invaded, being seen without being judged. And once someone touches the deepest layer of their defensive system in that way, they may leave in behavior, but they do not easily detach psychologically. In this video, I want to unpack with you why avoidant people struggle to let go of a super empath, why they disappear but never fully disappear, and what this really reveals about them, about you, and about this haunting push-pull dynamic. If you have ever been trapped in a connection like this, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you want to keep going deeper with me into avoidance psychology, boundaries, and how to love from a more grounded place, subscribe to the channel right now. There are people who say goodbye very clearly. They say they need space, say things are not the same anymore, say that maybe it is better to end things here so neither of you gets hurt more. You hear those words and try to accept that the relationship is over, even though inside you, there are still so many things you never got to understand. But what keeps you stuck is not the breakup itself, it is what happens afterward. Because they do not fully disappear. They still quietly check your social media, still reappear through a random message after months of silence, still ask about you through mutual friends, still leave behind little signs that make you feel as if you have not truly been forgotten. And it is exactly those half-open connections that pull you into a state that is so hard to escape, you do not know whether to let go or to wait, whether to believe they still care, or to accept that this is only the leftover trace of a feeling that was never strong enough to become true commitment. The deepest pain is not only that they left, but that they left in a way that never fully ends. You begin asking yourself if they really chose to walk away. Why do they keep coming back through these tiny signals? If they still remember, still care, still watch from a distance, then why do they not truly step toward you again? This half-close, half-distant behavior traps the person left behind inside a cycle of hope, disappointment, and endless analysis of every small sign, as if trying to piece together a picture the other person never fully intended to complete. And the important thing to understand is this: what you are witnessing is not random contradiction. It is a very specific obsession loop within avoidant psychology. To understand why an avoidant person can create such a deep sense of connection while also causing so much pain through their withdrawal, we need to look at the psychological foundation beneath the behavior. We need to look at the psychological foundation, not just at what happens on the surface. Avoidant people are not emotionless. In fact, many of them feel things very deeply, very intensely, sometimes even more intensely than what they ever show on the outside. The real issue is that their nervous system has been conditioned to experience emotional closeness as a danger zone. They learn to avoid vulnerability, avoid dependence, and avoid the feeling of being consumed by intimacy, as if loving someone too deeply might cost them their sense of self. So, over time, they build what feels like a psychological fortress. From the outside, that fortress looks like independence, strength, composure, and not needing anyone. They may seem highly self-sufficient, highly controlled, and very good at giving the impression that they are fine on their own. But in truth, much of what looks like strength is actually a form of self-protection against old pain they have never truly processed. Maybe they grew up in an environment where expressing emotion was not safe. Maybe they learned early that needing someone was risky, that opening up meant the possibility of abandonment, rejection, or hurt. And from there, they do not only avoid other people, they also avoid the most fragile parts of themselves. They are like someone living behind castle walls at all times, not because they do not need connection, but because they once connected and got hurt. So now defense has become the only way they know how to survive and love. The problem is that when someone deep enough reaches past those walls, the avoidant person does not only feel moved, they also feel out of control. And it is exactly that mixture of longing to be understood and fear of being touched too deeply that creates all of the painful contradictions you later see in them. Before we go deeper, we need to clarify something very important. Not everyone who is empathetic is a super empath. In this context, a super empath is not simply someone who is sensitive or emotionally understanding. They are the kind of person who can read the deeper emotional layer beneath behavior, see the fear hidden behind coldness, and sense the loneliness beneath the avoidant person's independent exterior. They do not only hear what the other person says, they also feel what the other person does not say. But what makes them different is not only that they see these things, it is how they respond to them. They understand without pushing. They are present without controlling. They accept without immediately trying to fix the other person or turn them into a healing project. That kind of presence creates a rare kind of safety the avoidant person does not feel demanded from, invaded, or forced to open up in order to be loved. And that is exactly why a super empath is often able to reach the real self beneath the defenses. They are not captivated by the avoidant person's mask, not overly drawn to the coolness, unpredictability, independence, or mystery on the surface. Instead, they connect with the more human part underneath the part that fears abandonment, the part that does not know how to need someone, the part that has lived behind defenses for so long that it has forgotten it also needs to be held in safety. And this is crucial. Avoidant people may be very used to receiving attention. They may be used to others being drawn in by their charm, their mystery, or their hot and cold energy. But they are not used to being truly seen, because being noticed still allows them to keep the mask. Being truly seen means someone has touched the part of them they have spent a lifetime hiding. And that experience is exactly what makes them feel drawn in, frightened, and unable to easily forget. This is exactly the point where avoidant people fall into their deepest inner conflict when they meet a super empath. They do not only feel drawn in, they also feel afraid at the same time. For the first time, they are experiencing a kind of connection that is very different from anything their defenses are used to handling. They feel understood without having to explain too much. They feel that someone is touching the deepest parts of them without judgment, without pressure, and without trying to control them. And for someone who has lived for so long in a state of protecting themselves from intimacy, that rare sense of safety is incredibly magnetic. It is like a person who has spent their life in darkness, suddenly seeing a door open toward light. One part of them wants to move closer. wants to stay, wants to believe that maybe this time, closeness does not have to mean pain. But at the exact same time, that very experience also makes them feel out of control. Because when someone reaches the real self beneath the defenses, they can no longer maintain their usual emotional distance. They become more vulnerable, more affected, more aware that they are standing in front of the possibility of being seen too clearly. And for avoidant people, this kind of real closeness is often not felt only as love, but also as a threat to their entire self-protective system. That is why they both long for the feeling and fear the feeling itself. They want to come closer, but they are terrified of what might happen if they truly stay. They want to be seen, but they are afraid that the cost of being seen is having to lay down the armor that has protected them for years. Psychologically, this creates a powerful inner paradox. Their heart is pulled toward connection, while their nervous system pulls them away from it. And because their defenses do not know how to process this rare kind of bond, they often react through confusion and instability, moving close, then pulling away, opening up, then shutting down. What matters here is that the super empath does not break the avoidance walls through force. They simply find the secret door that no one else saw. But the very fact that someone found that door is what unsettles the avoidant the most, because it makes them realize that the deepest part of them is no longer completely unreachable. This is one of the most painful paradoxes in avoidant people. They leave in order to feel lighter, yet they still cannot fully detach. When a relationship reaches a level of intimacy that feels too real, they often begin to feel overwhelmed. They believe that the other person's presence is the source of their inner unrest, making them feel suffocated, less free, and less in control of themselves. So they pull away with the belief that if they create enough distance, their mind will calm down again, their life will return to balance, and the inner confusion will slowly fade. In the logic of their defensive system, leaving is the way to regain safety. But the irony is that once they leave, they do not always feel the relief they expected. Instead, a different kind of emptiness begins to appear. They start to miss the other person, though they are not always brave enough to name that longing. They begin watching from a distance, checking social media, sending messages that seem random, or holding onto an invisible thread that is just enough to keep the connection from disappearing completely. And this is exactly what leaves the other person so confused. Because if they truly wanted to leave, why do they keep returning through these small signals? Psychologically, what is happening is that the avoidant person has confused the source of fear with the source of healing. At first, they believe the other person was the cause of their distress, the one triggering all of their fears around intimacy, dependence, and vulnerability. But only after losing them do they begin to realize that this same person was also the place where they had once found something very rare in their emotional life: understanding, safety, and the feeling of being truly seen without judgment. In other words, they leave in order to feel less afraid. But distance creates a new kind of pain, the pain of losing a connection their nervous system may not easily find again. And from that moment on, they are no longer simply gone. A part of them becomes trapped between two directions. Returning feels terrifying, but losing the connection completely also hurts. And that is where what we call obsession begins to take shape. The obsession loop of an avoidant person often does not begin while they are still in the relationship. It becomes most visible after they have already left, because even though their behavior may have cut the connection, their emotional system cannot disconnect that quickly. After losing a super empath, they still carry the imprint of a very rare experience, being deeply understood without being examined, being truly accepted, without being pressured to become someone else. And being close to someone without being controlled or overly demanded from, those emotional imprints cause a part of them to keep reaching for the old feeling, even while their rational mind still says distance is safer. That is why they begin to reappear in such familiar yet ambiguous ways, watching your stories late at night. Sending a short message, like just thinking of you. Asking about you through mutual friends. Or creating vague interactions just enough to keep a thread of connection without truly coming back. What matters here is understanding that this is not necessarily mature love. Nor is it always a sign that they are ready to rebuild a healthy relationship. Very often, this is an obsession with the feeling you once gave them, the feeling of being seen, soothed, and touched at their most real self without being harmed. Psychologically, it is like the body remembering a lost arm, even when the arm is no longer there. The nervous system continues sending signals to the place where it once was. Avoidant people experience something similar. Even after leaving the relationship, part of their emotional system keeps searching for the rare experience you once represented, and that is why they may miss you, seek you, and obsess over you, while still not being capable of truly staying with you in a mature way. What makes a super empath leave such a powerful imprint in the mind of an avoidant person is not that they are extraordinary in some flashy or dramatic way. It is that they reach the real human core the avoidant person has been hiding for far too long. Most people only connect with the avoidant surface version, someone who appears independent, self-controlled, calm, low maintenance, and emotionally contained. And because they only meet that surface self, the relationship usually remains at the surface as well. But a super empath is different. They do not stop at the appearance of strength. They see the fear beneath that strength. They are not fooled by self-sufficiency. They can feel the loneliness hidden inside it. They do not only notice the defenses, they also sense the need to be loved, held, and understood underneath those defenses. What matters most is that they do not force the avoidant person to open up in order to prove trust. They do not push them into a corner with heavy questions or constant emotional demands. Instead, they often create one very small but very deep moment. I see you. You don't have to tell me yet. I'm here if you want. That kind of non-forcing presence creates what could be called a deep truth marker in the avoidant mind. For the first time, they may experience what it feels like to be seen without being invaded, to have their vulnerable parts touched without being hurt, to be understood without being pressured to change immediately. And once that experience happens, it is very difficult for it to disappear, because from that moment on, the avoidant person can no longer fully believe their old story that intimacy only leads to pain. A part of them now knows that another kind of closeness exists, a kind that does not consume them, punish them for vulnerability, or turn emotion into a weapon. That is why they may leave, but not easily forget, because what remains inside them is not only the memory of a person, but the memory of a truth they once believed did not exist, that being truly seen and still remaining safe is possible in love. This is where many people become most confused. An avoidant person's obsession does not equal the capacity for healthy love. The fact that they cannot forget you, still quietly watch you, or continue to keep some vague thread of connection with you does not mean they are ready to come back and build a more mature relationship. And the fact that they are obsessed does not mean they are emotionally developed enough to stay with what they feel. Very often, they miss you not because they have learned how to love, but because you represent something extremely rare in their inner world. You represent the possibility of real connection. You touch the deepest part of them that they usually work so hard to hide. You shook the defensive system they once believed was necessary for survival. But all of that is still very different from knowing how to take responsibility for the impact they have on others. knowing how to stay when a relationship enters real emotional depth, and knowing how to build a safe space with another person instead of only returning when they feel lonely, confused, or nostalgic for what they once felt. This is the point where the person left behind must stay deeply clear, because otherwise it becomes very easy to mistake obsession for love, to mistake longing for maturity, and to mistake a returning message as proof that this time everything will be different. But the truth is, there are people who miss you deeply and still do not know how to love you well. There are people who cannot let go of the feeling you gave them and still have not done the inner work required to become safe enough for love. So what matters is not how much they still think about you, but how much they have actually changed in the way they relate to intimacy, emotional responsibility, and their own fear. And perhaps the most important sentence to remember here is this: just because someone cannot let go of you does not mean they are ready to love you the right way. If you are the kind of person often called a super empath in dynamics like this, the first thing you need to understand is that an avoidant person's obsession with you is not entirely about you as a person. Very often, what they cannot forget is not only who you are, but what you represent within their emotional world, the possibility of real connection, the feeling of being seen without being forced, the rare experience of safety. They have never truly known how to keep you touch the deepest part of them. But that does not automatically mean they are ready to stay with you. And this is where many deeply empathetic people get trapped. They see the fear behind the withdrawal. They see the vulnerability beneath the coldness. And they begin to believe that if they are patient enough, understanding enough, gentle enough, the other person will eventually wake up. But the truth is, you should not build your life around that assumption. You should not wait for someone to mature on your time. You also should not keep vague threads of connection alive simply because part of you hopes that their next return will be different. When you continue responding out of hope, continue assigning meaning to breadcrumbs, and continue allowing yourself to become an emotional resting place for someone who has not healed, you are not only prolonging the push-pull cycle, you are also slowly moving away from your own worth. What you need now is not to understand them more, but to protect yourself more clearly. Hold your boundaries. Stop responding just because you miss them. Stop living according to half signals as if they were promises. And ask yourself, is this relationship truly nourishing me? Or is it only keeping me stuck through ambiguity? Because in the end, empathy is only healthy when it is accompanied by self-respect. And the sentence you need to remember is this: the truth is, they may not be able to forget you, but that still is not enough to create a safe love. And if you are the avoidant person watching this video and beginning to recognize yourself in these patterns, I want you to hear this part without becoming defensive. The problem is not that the other person is too deep, too special, or too intense in a way that makes you lose control. The problem is that your nervous system is interpreting safety as a threat. When someone comes close in a way that is genuinely gentle, sees you without forcing you, and stays without consuming you, what should feel like healing can easily be misread by your body as danger. Not because that person is wrong, but because there are still old emotional memories inside you that link intimacy with the possibility of being hurt. And if you do not heal that, you will keep repeating the same painful cycle. You meet someone who truly moves you. You begin to open. Then you run when things become too close. Afterward, you become obsessed once they are gone. And then you repeat the same pattern with someone else. The tragedy is that you may keep telling yourself that you are simply choosing the wrong people, when, in truth, you are reacting to your own unhealed fear. That is why healing does not begin with finding a better person. It begins with being willing to look honestly at your own nervous system, being willing to enter therapy if needed, learning how to stay with uncomfortable feelings instead of running the moment anxiety appears, and beginning to question the old belief that closeness equals danger. You need to learn how to distinguish fear from real danger, because a racing heart, a sense of anxiety, or a feeling of losing control does not automatically mean the person in front of you is wrong for you. Very often, fear is simply a sign that you are touching the exact place in yourself that has not yet healed. And that is the one thing I want you to remember most. The fear you feel when someone comes close is not always a sign of the wrong person. Sometimes, it is a sign that you are touching the right wound. If you have stayed with me until this point, then perhaps you now understand something very important. The fact that an avoidant person cannot forget you is not always proof of a love mature enough to stay. Sometimes, what they cannot let go of is not only you, but the feeling they once had with you, the feeling of being seen, understood, and touched at their deepest self without being judged or pressured. But no matter how real that feeling was, it is still not enough to create a safe relationship if they have not done their own healing work. And this is where you need clarity. Because understanding why they cannot let go does not mean you have to remain inside a cycle that keeps exhausting you. Understanding their fear does not mean you have to become the place they return to whenever they feel lonely, only to leave again once closeness becomes too real. Some connections are deep, real, and unforgettable, and still not healed enough to become lasting love. If you are someone who has been held in place by half signals and unfinished returns, remember, this compassion does not mean sacrificing your peace. You can understand them and still choose not to wait. You can see their wounds and still keep boundaries around what hurts you. And if you are the avoidant person recognizing yourself in this video, I hope what you take from it is not guilt, but an invitation to grow. Stop running from what you truly long for, and begin learning how to stay with intimacy without treating it like a threat. Because in the end, what both sides truly need is not just intense feeling, but the ability to stay with truth, responsibility, and a kind of love that is no longer led by defense. If this video spoke to something inside you, subscribe to the channel and stay with me for the next videos. Here, we are not only talking about avoidant people, but also about how to protect your heart, your boundaries, and how to love without losing yourself.